A typical month. A typical month consists of charging rents and then each day receiving and recording payments and depositing funds at the bank, charging the late fees, entering invoices as they're received, paying vendors, distribution checks to owners, statements to owners, paying ourselves for the fees earned. This is one of 3 typical month videos, and this one will focus on accounts receivable, functions in accounts receivable. The first function that we're going to look at is charging the rents. That's under accounts receivable, scheduled receivables. Rents are generally charged near the end of the month when payments start coming in, or on the first workday of the month. We're going to do it as of the first workday of the month of March. The radio button for rent is marked, and what you do then is you click on compile. That brings up the list of tenants who are going to be charged rent. We're going to look at one of them first to show you what's happening. So we're going to look at Bruno, and this is Bruno's profile. And on tab number 2, notice that the next scheduled date for rent is 3/1. After we charge the rents, we'll show you then what happens. Okay, so once they're compiled, you just click on post. That records all the charges against all the tenants. What we'll do now is look at Bruno real quick again. So under profiles, tenant profiles, we'll select Bruno. And on tab number 2, notice now that the next scheduled date is 4/1. So what happens is it records the rent charge, increments the schedule. So that means you can't inadvertently charge rents twice during the course of a month, because the schedule gets advanced when you do it the first time. After you do the rent charges, you do any recurring charges. Recurring charges are things like trash reimbursements, parking, also used for posting rent credits. So in this particular database, we compile it. There's one recurring charge, which is a monthly trash removal reimbursement. You post that. So now the charges are all done for the month. After a certain period of time, the accounts receivable scheduled receivables function is also used to charge late fees. In this particular database, the tenants are late on the 7th of the month, so I'm going to make the scheduled through date the 7th. And then when you compile that, it goes out and finds all the tenants who are late and puts them on the screen for you. You can look at the individual ones. For example, if we looked at Roseman, notice that the balance due is $14.05, how much is late, a number of days late, how many times they were late in the last 12 months. All that information is here available to you to look at before you go ahead and post that. When you post it, it will record all the late fee charges. The other thing you can do in accounts receivable is charge a tenant for things that happen outside of rent. Let's say that the tenant was had a particular an NSF charge, or he was being charged for something that needed to be repaired, etc. You would go then to the ALTAS accounts receivable, charge tenant, and when you go to charge a tenant, you choose the tenant from the list and put the charge in and then post it, and then that charge is recorded against a particular tenant. All right, at any time during the month, what you can do is you can run a report to see what charges are unpaid, and that's under reports, tenant reports. And the very one at the bottom is tenant unpaid charges. And if we run that report and preview it on the screen, there's the list of all the tenants and what they owe. As I said, you can run that at any time you want to. So each day as you receive the rent payments as they come in and the mail's delivered, you've got a pile of rent payments to process. What you do is you go to accounts receivable, tenant receipt. The first thing you do is choose a tenant, and you can either get the tenant up by choosing the unit or the tenant. Most people use the tenant field to do it. Once you get to know your database, you can normally start typing in the tenant's last name, and as you type in, you'll know how many keystrokes it takes to get to a particular tenant. So in this particular case, I typed GUR and I got Edward Goureau up. The other option is to click on the flashlight button, which brings up the find list, and then you can see the list of tenants. So if you had a number of tenants with the same last name, it would probably be more efficient to choose them off of the find list rather than keying in a number of keystrokes. Same thing here, you start keying it in, it highlights the one that you want, you click on select it. It then pulls in the unit that the tenant is in, defaults to the bank account that the money is going to be deposited into. The payment amount defaults to the total amount of money that's owed. The memo field has the label check number in it, and the cursor goes to that spot so you can enter the check number. So when you enter the check number, you then have that recorded as the check that was received from the tenant. You have two choices. What you do then is you verify that the amount in the payment field matches the amount on the check that you have. If it doesn't match the amount, you change the payment amount to match whatever the payment actually was. In this particular case, that's the correct payment. So what we're going to do then is we have two choices. We can click on either new or post. Post records the payment and then returns you to the previous function that you were in, takes you out of the tenant receipt function. The new button records the payment, does exactly the same thing as post. The difference is that it leaves you in the function for a tenant receipt so you can put another one in. So if you have a number of them to do, you click the new button, it gives you a blank screen again, and the cursor is in the tenant field, and now we're going to choose the next tenant that we receive money from. The next one happens to be Bruno, so we start typing in until Bruno comes up. There's a payment note attached to Bruno, and the payment note says don't accept personal checks unless okayed by JH. You look to see that it was okayed if it's a check that you have in your hand. You do the same thing then, you enter the check number in, verify the payment amount matches the amount that's of the check itself, and then what you do is you click on the new button again. The next one we have is a number of money orders from Schrader. If you receive more than one payment media from the tenant, like for example 2 checks, or in this case 3 money orders, you choose the tenant to begin with. You can do it either one of the 2 ways, start typing in or use the find list. In this case I'll use the find list, select the tenant. It's a money order, so you can have a shortcut you can click on rather than typing it in. You can click on the payment label and it'll put the label money order into the memo field. Most people only put the last 4 or 5 characters of the money order in. And then change the dollar amount to match the dollar amount that you have in your hand, $500. Notice over on the right then what it's going to do, it gives you a summary of how much the current charges are and how much is being paid. We're paying $500 in this particular payment. Click on the new button again. And in order to choose the same tenant, you double click on the tenant label to bring in the last tenant that you work with. So here's the tenant. It's a money order. We click on the payment field, put the money order last 4 digits in, change the payment amount to match the amount that we actually have in hand, $500. Click on the new button. Tenant payment is $150. It's a money order. We put the last 4 characters of the money order in. That was the last one. Verify the amount. Click on the new button. Now let's say that the next check that we have in our hand that came in was money from an owner. So over in the right hand side, you can go over to ledger receipt. If you go to the ledger receipt, the owner in this case was Shank, and you choose the ledger. The payment amount that we received was $450. You usually put a memo in unless it's just a cash contribution. In this particular case, this was for roof repair. This particular owner, normally you have money coming in from tenants and you use that money to pay bills. This particular owner doesn't have a tenant right now. Therefore, any monies that get spent have to be reimbursed by the owner to cover the expenses. When you do a receipt like this, all you have to do is put the memo, the dollar amount. It automatically defaults to being a cash contribution from the owner. In this particular case, we click on the post because that's going to record this, take us back to where we were. So we're back over at the tenant receipt, and we'd put the next tenant receipt in. After you do the last tenant receipt and you're on the screen, the next step you want to do is you want to put the money on a deposit slip. So you click on security deposit receipt. That takes you over to the receipt screen. Deposit receipt takes us over to the deposit slip screen. It defaults to the sum of all the items that are checked. That's $3,715. Normally what you do is before you start a batch, you run a tape on the total of the amount, and then when you come to this screen, you verify that the amount of marked that's on this list matches the tape that you ran earlier. Assuming it's correct, what we do then, we enter in the total deposit amount. You can either key the amount in, or you can double click in the marked field and it'll copy the amount in this field over to the total deposit. You have 2 choices then. You can print the deposit slip, and there's the print button for the deposit slip, or you can print the report. The deposit slip, this is a copy of what it looks like. So it's a deposit slip with the OCR information about the bank account and the bank and bank account on it. If you use the deposit slip paper, it's perforated right around this spot, and therefore you can rip that off, take it down to the bank and turn it in. You don't have to fill out a physical deposit slip. On the bottom half of the deposit slip portion is the deposit slip report that you keep for your records. It has the total information, number of checks, and the total amount of money being put into the bank. Okay. The report only prints the bottom half of it. So if you do the print, it does the deposit slip and the report. If you just do the report, it only does the report section. Once you've done the printing of it, you can click on post. It posts the transaction, takes you back over to the tenant receipt screen, where you can do another batch if you want to. The other item in accounts receivable that you do on a regular basis, typically when you receive a security deposit payment from a tenant, you go to the security deposit receipt. That screen is very similar to the tenant receipt screen. You choose the tenant the same way. Let's say in this case the tenant was Comets, and it defaults to the bank account that the the security deposit goes into. The other one was a checking account where the rent money goes into. This is the escrow bank account where the security deposits go into. You choose the amount of the payment, and the payment for the security deposit, let's say, was $795, and record the check number and choose what the charge is. Normally when you charge the tenant prior to doing a receipt. When you do the security deposit receipt, you choose the charge at the time you're doing it, and the only charges that are available are the ones that are marked as security deposits. In this particular database, the security deposit and the pet deposit. So this is a security deposit, and the amount was $795. We then go ahead and click on post, and that records the payment, and then you go over to the deposit slip screen and make the deposit if that's the only one you're putting on the deposit that's going to the escrow bank. That covers the functions in accounts receivable that happen during the typical month. The other two videos are available covering the invoices and paying vendors, and then the other one is the owner statements and paying the owners. Thank you for listening to this.